Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Independent Living Management presents Pioneers in Disability Rights and Community Organizing. An interview with Lillibeth Navarro.
Hi, I'm June Chaos here with Doug Uziak, and we're interviewing Lillibeth Navarro. Welcome.
Hi.
Lillibeth, how did you ever get involved with community organizing, and what type of community organizing have you done?
Well, I'm from the Philippines, and I did a lot of that before I came to the United States. Because in my town, until I started working for a social welfare agency, I didn't know that there were others like me. Well, I kind of had an idea, but um, at that time when I started working, they seemed to have been coming out of the woodwork. And
What do you mean others like you?
people with disabilities like myself, people of all kinds of disabilities. I saw them coming and talking to the social workers, and I started befriending them. And before I left, we had put together a center. I didn't know it was a center for independent living. I didn't know what to call it, but we called it, in our language, House of Life, because there was this client. He had a psychiatric disability, and he came to my office every day, and he would say, "So, you're all set. You went to college. You have a job. Now, what are you going to do for your brothers and sisters with disabilities?" So it was a challenge. At first, it would irritate me because I just wanted to be good at my job. And then he opened up the horizon to start for me to start thinking beyond myself, to look at the larger community. And that's how I got involved. So when I came here to the United States, I was really amazed at all the facilities and resources you have here. From day one, elevators, accessible buses. It was like amazing. And each one of those resources and facilities was like a little footprint, that was leading somewhere. So I said, where are these people who have made these things happen? I wanted to meet them and find them, meet them, and follow their lead. And that led me to the Independent Living Center in my area, in Los Angeles.
So can you talk more about the kind of organizing you've been involved in since you found the center in LA?
Since I found the center in Los Angeles? Um, well, organizing the community in central Los Angeles to found the center, to start the center, was like a continuation, like chapter 10 of a continuum. And we were a bunch of activists that did a lot of work around the ADA, public transit. We were members, and we still are members of ADAPT. And we decided that we needed a very strong community because we were still beset with a lot of issues. Of course, the challenges to the ADA, among other things. So we put our heads together. We decided we had a lot of time. We had a little SSI. We had our healthcare covered, and we had a lot of time to learn about the CIL business side of things. So, and we had the passion and the vision. And so we had a little group called IRAPS, and we have just successfully organized for the Public Authority, which is a consumer-based organization focusing on personal assistance services. We decided that since we had major victories there, that we could establish an independent living center, which we did. It took us a year, and we opened officially in March. And among the first things we've organized around also was something that the situation, brought up to to our eyes, and which is the struggle for paratransit. Um, in Los Angeles right now, there are major cuts in paratransit. We were given, the paratransit providers in Los Angeles were just given an award for being the best paratransit in the nation, and then right after that, they came up with proposals to hurt the consumers because they were claiming there was a big budget, shortfall. So the administration came up with proposals that did not touch the administration budget, did not touch the provider's budget, meaning the taxi cabs that were providing the service. It only touched the consumers. So we organized ourselves and worked with other groups, and the bottom line is we got the executive director of that system. We got him to resign, and so the next step is to find. Oh, we also got more people with disabilities on the board. So the next step we're watching now is for that board, which is a majority of consumers, to choose a very good executive director that has consumers in mind, who has consumers in mind.
For 1 second, I know you've done a lot of organizing even before you helped to get that new center in LA off the ground. Can you talk about some of that organizing that you've done over the years?
Diane Coleman, who's one of my heroes, was the organizer for Adapt of Southern California, and in 1989 she had to leave the state to organize another Adapt chapter, and so she left me the responsibility of organizing continuing her work. And I didn't know much about organizing, at least the way you guys do it here. So I just had to learn real fast, and she was a great mentor, and she assured me that it was going to be all right. So I was still struggling with losing her as my mentor, but I had to get it together quickly. And so for a couple of years I was the community organizer for Adapt Southern California, and we always organized around the budget cuts every year, the threats to in-home supportive services. We helped to organize around the ADA, and then joined the first protests around attendant care on a national level when Adapt National transitioned from transportation to personal care services. And then after that, we got involved with organizing around the in-home supportive services program in Los Angeles when legislation came down that gave consumers the opportunity to improve the system through the public authority. And the public authority is a board. It's a semi nonprofit agency that's consumer driven, and that has for the first time a say in changing policy about personal care. And we work in partnership with a lot of organizations. We did legislative work, we did street theater, we did telephone campaign, until we won the struggle for the public authority. So it's now in place. It's a very new organization, but already a very popular one. And from then on, we moved to organizing for the Independent Living Center.
You said a lot of things that you had to learn once your mentor left. What were those things that you had to learn in order to be a good organizer?
Well, one thing that I knew about Diane, which was very complimentary to how I felt, was she was about people. Not just knowing them as a name on a mailing list, but really getting involved with them, knowing what they needed in terms of the tools for community organizing, in terms of even just getting to the meeting. She I mean, her flyers were just full of information. What bus to take, what number to call, where to get help just to get to the meeting. And they were passionate flyers. They had pictures. They had the reason why you had to come. They incited emotion. They were intelligent flyers. So there was good research, good sources, personal touch, personal involvement, and just being who she always has been, which is a woman of passion about the issues, because she had, and she still has, I saw her the other day, um, she has this in her heart, 101%. And one of the things that I heard her talk about as she left, and this was the last day when we were at a restaurant saying goodbye to her. She was talking about technology and how um, technology is so disability friendly. And while we were worried that technology would put aside the disability agenda because things would be so easy, she said, but no, no, she said, technology, no, the disability movement is going to be even more important because it will teach humanity. It will teach society to be more human. And that really created an impact on me, which is the reason why, for me, there's no letting up. Even if we, even if we won all our disability issues, there would still be that struggle to be human, because I think that's the biggest thing that a disability brings about.
But when it comes to your learning techniques on community organizing, what was it that you had to develop?
I learned quickly how to work with the media. I learned quickly how to get to know the leaders of different community organizations, who were the power players in each organization, because these leaders could move their community. Um, I learned quickly to get in touch with the legislators, um, how to do an effective legislative visit, how to do street theater, how to get our community excited, and also how to take care of our people while we were sitting in, or getting rained on, or sleeping over in tent city, um, how to marshal resources, food, water, umbrellas, fans, battery chargers, um, home, DME providers to be there, to make sure that even if the chair breaks down, there's somebody there taking care of it. How to even do travel plans, how to organize people with disabilities on a trip to go to different cities in the United States, because ADAPT, makes those trips twice a year. Um, and just to be a very quick problem solver, and not to be daunted by anything, and to trust that things are going to work out even in the hardest of situations.
Well, Lillibeth, you talked about Diane being one of your mentors. Can you talk about other mentors that you found, how you found them, how you learned from them, and how you continue to maybe use them now?
Yes. I remember Linda Nips, who is, she passed away a few years ago. And Linda was a severely disabled woman who, I think for over 10 years, single-handedly carried on the IHSS issue, the in-home supportive services issues, and she carried it on from her bed, practically her bed. Um, she was a very loving woman, just like Diane was. And she was a scholar. It was really amazing how much information she could get together. And this was even before we had the internet, the email. I was on her mailing list for I think about 5 years, and it came regularly. It was full of information. It was it was an encyclopedia for IHSS, and even today I feel she's very much with me, um, because of the way she was. Also, she was a people person, and before she died, among the last things she said was, "Lillibeth, I need you to be there to continue this. I love you." And you know how we memorialize our heroes. And one thing that I want the independent living movement to start doing, and I'm glad it's happening now, is is to have a memorial for people like Linda. Um, One of the things I'd like to see is for one of our ILC rooms to be dedicated to her memory. But it's really the method with which she worked the issues, and the legislators knew her. Major leaders in the community knew her, and I think if it were not for her groundwork, we would not be where we are today.
In all the activity that you were involved with, the various organizing and street theater, which action stands out most in your mind?
Oh, it was the ADAPT action in Montreal, um, which was, I think, my very first one, which is, of course, the most impressive to me. No, it was my second one. Um, we were in Montreal, Canada, and it was the first time I saw people with disabilities all over the country, and in fact, maybe the world, because it was in Canada. And we were hounding APTA, and they were, of course, at a conference like this one. And it was a fun thing for me because I learned to run, um, to, to, to do strategy, and we were mapping out the hotels and which elevators to take, and so it was fun. It was more play than work, and I was also impressed at how much impact we made on the media. We were covered every day. We were in the newspapers every day, and we forced the leader of APTA to come down meet with us, and we were again working as a solid group. I remember it was raining. I mean, real pouring on us, and we were donned with raincoats, and the police barricades, were there, and we kept pushing beyond them, and the police would get us back, and then we'd go, they would disengage the wheelchairs, and then we'd have the non-disabled partners click them back on, and then we'd move again forward, and nothing, just nothing could stop us. And that, to me, that action was the one thing that gelled that spirit in me, that nothing should stop us, not the rain, not the police, not the barricades, not even the wheelchair conking out on us.
You mentioned street theater. I know you've been involved in a lot of that. Can you talk about some of the memorable kinds of street theater you've seen or been involved in directly?
Well, one thing that stands out for me is the action we did with Rick Tauger. Rick Tauger wasn't a member of ADAPT. Rick Tauger was, um, a person in the community. He was a quad, and he had a fight with his DME provider over a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair. And, they did not want to fund it. I think Medicare Medical, it was over the Medicare Medical fight over who would pay, for the wheelchair. And he decided that he was not going to take an exception, because they wanted to make an exception for him to fund his wheelchair, whereas the laws for the rest of us were different. So he decided that he would not get out of bed until it was um, changed for the rest of us. So we saw him as our hero, and we had him on a stretcher leading the march to the governor's office in Los Angeles. And so, and then we brought a manual wheelchair and tied it around this huge sculpture in front of the governor's office. So we had that. We had Rick Tauser, and then we were doing, we were dramatizing the issue, and that to me was very effective. Um, so that was one thing that stands out. Another thing was, when we it was with Adapt, when we decided to um, go into the corporate offices of APTA somewhere. It was a branch office, and what really impacted me at that time was not so much the external theatrics, but it was the anger that I saw among the activists. For me, that was so powerful. It was anger that was not destructive, but it was the kind of anger that makes for systems change. And that was what impressed me the most.
How do you get people to participate in this type of community organizing? How do you mobilize them?
Um, well, what I do, I feel I have to lay the groundwork, get to know them, get to know their issues. Nothing about what they say should be insignificant. And then when you get them, then you talk about the issues. And then you start seeing them nodding. And then you start seeing them expressing anger about certain things. And then you you count on that. But you also count on how much they can give in terms of what they want to do, in terms of what they want to contribute, in terms of their skills, their talents. And when you give them the opportunity to contribute, to be a spokesperson where they never had that experience before, or to lead a group, where they never did before, um, you you help bring out the leader in them. And if they're not leaders, you make them better followers. And that's how you get them to participate. Um, and also, you have to model for them. They have to see in you the conviction. They have to see in you the passion. They have to see in you that you did your homework. You know what you're talking about. You did your research. You're a person of authority on that particular issue. And you're a person that they can trust. You have to build a track record so that they can trust you and they can tell you things and they can tell you about problems so that then together you can solve them.
What about the online techniques that you've used in organizing, using the internet? What kind of things have you done?
Well, it's always good to get the word out on things. For example, when we recently, there was a court case brought against us by the city attorney and city attorney's office in Los Angeles, because we participated at a big rally again around IHSS, and of all 50 arrestees, they zeroed down on two people, Audrey and myself, and they thought that we were the honchos, the leaders. So they came down on us and they sued us. Um, Well, we found the email very powerful in getting the word out and in getting people to come, you know, to the trial. And it was also very encouraging to receive email back. People who were encouraging us even if they could not come. People who said that they would call the city attorney's office and blast them. And people who would just say, "You go, girl." So that was very powerful. I have yet to use the computer to the max. I struggle between doing my desk work, community organizing, and just the computer. So time is a problem for me. But training also on the computer is something I have yet to maximize, to learn. Um, but it's a very powerful tool. Uh, it trans it transcends time and space, and it's really disability friendly because you don't have to wait for your attendant to help you get up and then wait for the paratransit, to go to a meeting. You get instant information right there, and you can give instant feedback. So it's a wonderful tool.
Lillibeth, how does somebody who comes from the Philippines to the U.S., was a community organizer in the Philippines, comes to the U.S., gets involved in community organizing and upsetting the system there, and then you travel over to Canada to do the same thing over there? I mean, how come you're not stuck in a prison somewhere?
Before I came to the U.S., I think I already had um, constructive anger. I was very mad at the political system in the Philippines. We were under martial law when I came to the U.S., and I wanted to do something about it because I knew we were an oppressed people. When I met the disability movement, boy, did I realize that we were even more oppressed as a disability community. And so, but this time I was in a free country and I could do something about it. Besides, this was a community I discovered I was really a part of. And it has a wonderful history. It had, its heroes, it had its culture. It was like, I was like a fish taking into water. This was the community, this was the family that I've been looking for. And so I think that was, you know, that was my history, and I have to this day been yearning for the day when I can bring it back home, or at least I want to see that it's back home. The same um, experience of empowerment is part of the Philippine experience as well.
Are you seeing the independent living philosophy being adopted back in the Philippines?
I went back home in '98. Of course, I had to have an attendant to get around, but um, I've seen signs of some disability uprising. I mean, whoa! I saw the first ramps in the city of Manila. I saw an accessible restroom. Something's happening there. It may not be, it is not as developed as you have it here, but some people are beginning to rise up. In fact, I came to the U.S. because um, I got a scholarship after writing about disability experiences during the International Year for Disabled Persons. It was a year declared by the UN celebrating disability. So that's how I got here. And to this day, it's like that celebration of the disabled person was like this pebble thrown in the lake. And you can see, how to this day that's reverberating. And I am hopeful, especially after what I heard 2 nights ago about the activities on an international level to um, empower people with disabilities all over the world.
Can you talk about your work with the media? What have you learned about working with the press, the TV, radio?
I came to the U.S. as a journalism fellow, and I had my first 2 years of training in print journalism, and the last 2 years of graduate school, um, I completed my master's in public relations. So I had the technical schooling for that, and so but I see that even with the media, you really have to um, be very persistent with the media. You have to impart why your issues are important, why your event is should be covered, why they shouldn't ignore you, why they should publish that article, why your event competes with merit with other events, why your story is better than, you know, a cat rescue, um, and also that it's important to get to know the media. The reporters are human beings. You know, you have to charm them. You have to show that you know what you're talking about. You have to be just media savvy, and you have to be hard hitting about the story. Um, when, what, when, where, why is important to them, and I know that it's also important for you to come up with something interesting. That's why we come up with street theater with, to the media, three wheelchairs is like 30 people. And, but then you also have to learn about media fatigue. You have to be creative in thinking out different strategies. Okay, no, blocking doors, that's old hat. And so you have to keep creating new and exciting adventures for the media to cover you. And also, um, when they don't cover you, there's always other alternatives. Um, you can use you know, the less popular media outlets, and so not to give up on the big, the big media outlets, but to use as many, different ones. If you don't get the newspapers, heck, you can use radio. If you can't get radio, well, some other thing. Um, but always to keep your issue alive as much as you can and as much coverage you want.
You said you've learned about strategizing. Can you share with us what it is you learned and how you go about developing a strategy?
Um, yes, for you to develop a strategy, you really have to know who you're dealing with. With a transit issue, we had to know APTA, who the players are, what what their strongest um, arguments are against your issue. Um, you have to know the corporate layout if you're dealing with going to their offices. You have to know their weaknesses. Um, when you have all your information together, then you can develop a strategy. And developing a strategy is also knowing your community, your own capabilities in terms of people power, in terms of resources, in terms of also your own research about the issue. And then you have to work with the community. You cannot be a lone ranger. You have to work with different groups, listen to the best ideas, and even not the best ideas have merit. So to make sure that even those ideas are part of the bigger strategy so that the community feels that it's their own. They have ownership of it. So I think that's the best way to develop strategy. Um, that it's doable, that it's intelligent, that it's achievable, that it's respectable also, I think.
You know, we often learn best from making mistakes. Can you talk about some of those experiences for you?
Well, yes, there's a lot of that. Um, Sometimes you can be passionate about an issue and you can misread your group or your coalition partners. Sometimes the 10 of you are rah rah about something, but the rest of the 30 are not, and you need them. And so there were actions when there were just a handful of us because we misread the whole group. Um, so it's really important to sort of take the temperature of the whole group and see whether you're solidly behind this or you're mediocre about it. Um, but sometimes that's not exactly a mistake because you may be right on target about something and you rush to it, you head for it, and you may not get coverage or you may not, you know, get what you want, but you still make impact. So, but for me, the biggest lessons are it's important to know what the group feeling is, so we can get them all engaged. Uh, Media is important. Sometimes somebody drops the ball on the media. You have everything. My God, I remember this one march that we planned for. It was excellent. My God, it was complete. But the LA Times did show up because we the one who was supposed to do that somehow dropped the ball. And so you have to just make sure that the people you delegate to are really solid on their commitment. Another thing, and this is interesting, is during the protest against the UCLA football players who were abusing accessible parking spaces. I remember that we organized to make it a cross disability event, and things were moving fast, you know, and I was giving very sketchy directions. And I remember a blind activist cursing me, telling me, "You're not being responsive to my needs as a blind person." And I thought I was giving directions pretty good. And he said, "No, the way you do it is, you you tell you were telling people, okay, let's head back to the court, to court, you know, and not giving specific directions how a blind person like myself would get there." So I had made the mistake of, oh, I just assigning someone to walk with him, and that was not good enough. And I respect that. So, you know, working cross disability, being aware that there are other people with certain needs that you have to um, to think of was is something that to this day I have to learn to be more sensitive about. Sometimes because you work with a lot of people in wheelchairs, you know, you talk a certain lingo, which has to change dramatically in order to accommodate people with other disabilities. Then there's funding too. You have to, as a community leader, also be like a mother in a sense, making sure that your group has what it needs. Um, Otherwise, they come to you and you know and they support you on an action, and you don't even have water for them, or umbrellas for them or fans for them. I mean, it's constantly a learning experience.
The importance of coalition building as well as negotiating.
Um, Seeing things in unity, to me, is a very important element of working with the community. Like I said, making sure that you have a you have common ground, you're thinking the same way, you're on the same page, and the issues, the way you present them, can be the very same issues, um, just presented differently by another group. Um, that you know that to me is the way I try to work with different groups, to see where they're coming from and to appreciate their history. Sometimes, for example, in the with the blind community, they see the benefits issue differently because they've had a different history from those of us with physical disabilities on wheelchairs. And so it's incumbent upon me to get to know their history, to get to know why they're talking a certain way. Also, especially with the developmental disabilities community, the fact that they had parents as advocates, um, very effective advocates, is a very important thing that I needed to know and that I needed to appreciate for me to work with them. So it's constantly educating myself about who my audience is, who my partners are, and how to work with them effectively, and what they do best, and to delegate to them, to do the best that they can do, much better than you. I think coalition building is recognizing that there's so many different groups, each group with a gift to bring to the table.
How do you deal with burnout for yourself as well as for the people who are working with you and organizing with you? How do you deal with it? How do you replenish your energy?
Well, until recently, it was going back to my respirator. So, taking care of yourself, which I don't do a very good job um, on. So, taking care of yourself is really important. It's amazing what 10 minutes of oxygen can do for you. Those of us with oxygen are really lucky to have that. But I try to do something different. I'm lucky that I have two adopted sisters, both with disabilities. I go out with them on the weekend. We go to movies, we go to the beach, whatever. We do something totally different away from disability issues. But of course, it doesn't leave you. You go to a theater, you encounter an inaccessible restroom, then it's there. It's constantly there. But you really gotta be involved with the whole world. You cannot be so myopic in your vision, and you have to have fun. Um, the way it has been for me is each disability event has to be fun. It has to be fun. So also with our co-activists, it's also very fortunate that we like to eat out, we like to do something before the event and after the event, and then even after that we talk on the phone about the event.
What do you mean until recently? You said you until recently you just went and got some oxygen or used your respirator.
Yeah. Well, I had polio as a baby, and I'm. It's a progressive thing, and I did not. I did not need a respirator before, but since 1990 I had to have one, so I have it. I use it at night, and I did not need oxygen before, but my sister says I now need some. So, and you know, it's real. Progressive disability takes its toll. You may have, I still have the passion about my work, but the reality is I have a physical disability to be mindful about. So it's really important for not just for yourself, but for your community to preserve your health as long as you have it. And not, you know, when my sister told me you need oxygen now, it's gonna be a regular thing for you. For a moment there, I said, "Oh God, not another thing," you know. But it's part of life, and again, it's you know, if I can deal with this, then perhaps humanity can say, "Oh, it's not a big deal after all. If she can do it, then I can do it." You know, not to be scared about the progressiveness of things, and to take the new step, you know, with hope. And we're lucky. We have the technology to extend our lives. My God, thank God for this big green tank of oxygen. I'm going to put my arms around it. Because of it, I can still do my work. I can continue, and we'll keep going until it's the time to go, you know.
How do you approach negotiating once you get somebody to the table?
That brings to mind our meeting with Gloria Molina. She's a supervisor in Los Angeles, and this was when we were um, fighting for the public authority. How do we approach negotiating? Well, this public official, or for any public official, um, um, could think a certain way, and they think they can teach you about, you know, your issues. And to an extent, they're right. She knew a lot about funding. We didn't know much about funding, or our goal was to get more funding. So we had an appointment with her, and before we can even talk about our issues, she told us to sit, and she was gonna teach us. She had a board or something. She was motioning on, you know. So we just had to listen to her. We really had to put aside our agenda and listen to her. And when she felt that we listened to her, then slowly, we could tell her about our side of things. And in the end, and this was much later, not the end of that meeting, but the end of that campaign, she voted for our proposal. So the results do not necessarily happen at the end of a meeting. They can happen over a period of months or even years. But the thing is to keep those people engaged, to let them know that you're here, that you're monitoring their support or non support for the issues, and that you keep feeding them with information so that it's constantly on their radar screen.
Lillibeth, what do you hope your legacy will be?
What do I hope my legacy would be? Um, well, I hope to continue the legacy I've been given. Um, but to put on top of that, you know, the particular mark that I've been given as a gift. Um, I want a bigger dimension. I want to see the disability story replicated in the different minority groups. At our center now, we're working with the Korean community, and them, because they've been really active, and they've been seeking us out. The missing piece is for us to share with them the disability story. But in sharing with them with the disability story, we want to unearth the Korean disability story. So the legacy I want is, you know, for that particular gift to come out. I want to see more people being able to do that with the Korean community, with the Latino community, with the Filipino community, for those communities to feel that the mainstream disability community is so open and accessible that they can feel ownership of it, and that their contribution, in fact, would be their own version of their disability story. That's the kind of legacy I want.
So in some ways, it's like helping each group tell their stories and create their own version of their disability identity.
Yes, yes.
It's sort of follows where I'm heading, except you came to a conclusion where I'm still lost. Can you explain what you mean by the Korean story, the Philippine story, the Latino story? What exactly are we talking about?
When we come to this country as people, I mean, as immigrants or people from other countries, we come with our culture, we come with our disability experience. How coming to this country impacts us is a story. How it impacts us individually and how it impacts us as a group is a story that we still need to unearth. I remember meeting this lady from Ecuador, and she's a, a person with a disability, and she has a group that meets every month, and they're a group of people with epilepsy, specifically from Ecuador. So, what is their story? It intrigues me how they came to that point. How come they're meeting all by themselves? How come they haven't heard of the mainstream disability movement? And what are their struggles? How can we bring them to the fold? Or how can we go to them?
But what would be the value of bringing their separate story into the overall disability rights movement?
Because it's part of the entire tapestry. Our story, the mainstream American disability story, is a huge part of a big picture. And it's a human story. It's our story, only in a different color or a different shape. It's also our story. And like they framed it the other day, we need to get involved with those groups because as our rights here are beginning to be dismantled by the Supreme Court, the Congress, it's important to put it in the context of human rights. Disability rights are human rights, and it's true. And so if we have the echo from different minority groups about what we're about in terms of people with disabilities with rights, then our struggles here would only be reinforced by those little stories from different groups.
Seems to me that the feeling of shame related to disability crosses different cultures, and that by allowing people to tell their stories, do you mean that they can develop not only a sense of commonality but identity, disability identity, and pride and passion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, this was why the disability story touched me so profoundly. Because ever since I was a little kid with a disability, um, I've had that sense in me. You know, it was difficult to grow up in a society that really devalued people with disabilities and the disability experience. Um, but you know what Diane was saying about we have to teach humanity, society, to be human again. The experience of disability brings that out. in a very unique way in different cultures. And so we need to find those, we need to find and hear those stories, because those stories are beautiful and they would complete the picture. And again, it's a human story from the dust to the mountain, you know, where we can say as a society, you are beautiful, you are powerful, you're a decent human being because of the experience of disability. I know that there's a people, you know, are squeamish about, you know, the word inspirational. But you know what? We are. We are. Because we're like that little pearl, you know, I mean, that little oyster that knows to turn into a pearl. That irritation, you know. There are daily irritations. I mean, your attendant doesn't show up on time. This driver doesn't take you on the bus. These are irritations. But I think people with disabilities know how to deal with those. And we have that testament to humanity, that we do not have to shy away from those. We do not have to kill ourselves. We do not have to get desperate. We have to confront these things. And confronting these things is the very testament that the society around us needs to hear.